Madam First Lady, the Director General of WTO, my dear sister, Dr. 𝐂𝐄𝐒 Okonjo-Iweala, the President and Executives of the Oxford Africa Society, Dean of the Blavatnik School of Government, Professor Nari Woods, fellow Africans, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I bring you warm greetings from the Republic of Sierra Leone, our beautiful country on the stunning West African coast. As we gather here today at the prestigious Oxford Africa Conference on the eve of Africa Day, I am struck by a profound contradiction. For centuries, ladies and gentlemen, the narrative of Africa has been shaped by outsiders. Our beloved continent, the cradle of humanity and home to ancient civilizations, bear immense cultural wealth. Yet, it has been reduced to simplistic narratives of dependency, conflict, and underdevelopment. These external narratives have influenced global perceptions, but even more dangerously, have shaped how we view ourselves. As I look around, I see some of the brightest minds from our beloved continent gathered at one of the world's most prestigious institutions. And in these esteemed halls of Oxford, where knowledge is valued, Africa's intellectual contributions are still undervalued. Our perspectives marginalized and our agency questioned. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is our reality. A continent of 1.3 million people, with the youngest population in the world, vast natural resources, boundless creativity, still struggles to control its narrative and shape its future. But I see a profound shift, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you see it too. From Cape Town to Cairo, Freetown to Djibouti, Africans are awakening to the power of what I call quotidian African agency. And that is our capacity to make choices, act independently, and shape our destinies. This daily African agency involves farmers using innovative agricultural techniques, tech entrepreneurs developing solutions for local challenges, artists reclaiming our cultural narratives, and students questioning established norms while envisioning new possibilities. The Oxford Africa Society embodies this awakening, and I say thank you to you. Since the 1950s, the winds of decolonization swept across our continent, you have evolved from mere student club to a powerful community of change agents, I congratulate you. In an environment where it will be easy to become absorbed in academic pursuit or distance yourself from the challenges facing our continent, you have instead discovered your mission and fulfilled it faithfully. This year's theme, changing narratives, vision, action, and transformation of Africa, recognizes that we stand at a crossroads. This year, the African Union's focus on reparation acknowledges historical injustices while confronting contemporary challenges of economic exclusion and marginalization in global decision-making. We are all called to reimagine Africa, not as it has been portrayed, but as we know it to be, a continent of agency, innovation, untapped potential, ready to take its rightful place on the global stage. Yet, we would be naive to underestimate the resistance to this transformation. The path ahead is fraught with formidable obstacles, both external and internal. Externally, we face a global order that is not designed with our input or interest in mind. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed this reality. When vaccines became available, ladies and gentlemen, Africa stood last in line, not by accident, but by design. International financial systems continue to disadvantage our economies. Although we contribute relatively small amounts to global greenhouse gas emissions, climate change disproportionately affects our communities. And global media persist in portraying our continent through a lens of poverty, conflict, and helplessness. Madam President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, internally, we must confront uncomfortable truths. Rising debt levels threaten our economic sovereignty. Food insecurity challenge our most basic resilience. The digital divide risks leaving our young people behind in the global knowledge economy. Governance failures have eroded public trust in our institutions in Africa. And all too often, our 54 nations speak with 54 different voices on global stage, diluting our collective influence. Perhaps most insidiously, we struggle against internalized narratives that limit our imagination of what Africa can truly be. After generations of being told what we cannot do, some have begun to believe it. These challenges can seem overwhelming. They might tempt us to retreat into the comfort of familiar patterns or seek external saviors. But there are no external saviors. But this is precisely what the old narrative would have us do. I stand before you today not with easy answers, but with a powerful guiding principle. African agency. This principle, the insistence that Africans must be the primary architects of Africa's future, can illuminate our path forward. African agency is not merely a philosophical concept, but a practical approach to development, governance, and international relations. It demands that we move from being policy takers to policy makers, from consumers of others' solutions to creators of our own. In Sierra Leone, we have embraced this principle through our National Development Plan, which centers on 5 transformative game changers. 1, feed Salone, that is food security. This is our comprehensive strategy for food security and agro-industrial transformation, which puts our farmers at the center of our economic future. 2 is human capital development. Our bold reforms in education and healthcare that prepare our people to participate in the global knowledge economy and help shape it. 3, the youth employment scheme to create dignified, sustainable jobs that harness the creativity and energy of our young population. Technology and infrastructure development, using digital transformation to catch up and leapfrog traditional development stages. 5, public service reforms to enhance governance and service delivery to rebuild trust between citizens and government. These initiatives align with AU Agenda 2063 and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, demonstrating how national strategies can advance continental and global ambitions. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, they represent African solutions to African challenges, designed with specific context and aspirations in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, if the African agency is our compass, then what is our map? How do we translate this guiding principle into concrete action? Our plan must operate simultaneously at multiple levels, from the individual to the continental, from the cultural to the economic. First, we must assert our epistemic agency. And I say that again, we must assert our epistemic agency. Africans must lead knowledge production about Africa. This involves decolonizing education, prioritizing indigenous knowledge systems, and ensuring that African voices are adequately represented in global intellectual discussions. As Nelson Mandela once asserted, and I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." End of quote. By reclaiming our intellectual sovereignty, we lay the foundation for all other forms of agency. Second, we must institutionalize African agency in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, promoting our continent's role in advancing these fields. Africa has produced innovations that address unique African challenges, including mobile platforms and medical diagnosis suited for resource-limited environments. We must scale these successes through increased investment and cross-border collaboration in the continent. Third, we must assert African agency in key economic sectors like agriculture, extractive, and trade. The African Continental Free Trade Area represents a historic chance to boost intra-African trade from its current levels to create millions of jobs and develop regional value chains. Fifth, we must cultivate a Pan-African vision that transcends colonial boundaries and fosters solidarity among African peoples and diaspora communities. As Kwame Nkrumah reminded us, I am not, and I quote, "I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me." End of quote. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we must speak with only one voice in global forums. Our influence becomes undeniable when 54 nations of Africa align their positions on trade, climate, or financial architecture reforms. If we commit to this path, we will collectively create the future we truly desire. Ladies and gentlemen, envisioning a global order where African nations speak with a unified, influential voice on climate action, trade rules, and global security is crucial. An Africa where intracontinental trade flows freely, creating millions of jobs and prosperity for our citizens. An Africa where innovations address African challenges and scale globally. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a world where international financial institutions reflect Africa's economic weight and development priorities, where digital technologies link the most remote villages to global markets and knowledge. Imagine a continent where governance is transparent, responsive, and where citizens trust their institutions. An Africa where development initiatives effectively reach the most vulnerable populations. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a far-off utopia. The fundamental elements are already being assembled through initiatives like the AFCFTA, the APRM, and various regional integration efforts. The critical question is not whether this future is achievable, but whether we will act with enough urgency, unity, and strategic vision to realize it. Changing the narrative about Africa involves more than just a shift in perceptions. It is about fundamentally transforming our realities. It is about building the Africa we want and shaping the international order we deserve. It is about telling a story of hope, resilience, and opportunity, not as public relations, but as a lived experience for all Africans. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Africans here, I address you today not as distant observers, but as active participants in this unfolding story. To the members of the Oxford Africa Society, you are part of a tradition of African excellence that spans generations. Your presence as this esteemed institution is not just a coincidence, it is crucial for the transformation of our continent. So, as you develop your knowledge and expand your networks, remember that you are not just building personal careers, but also contributing to a collective journey. Return to the continent, either physically or through your work, and apply your brilliance to our most pressing challenges. To policymakers and leaders like myself here, let us move beyond the rhetoric to implementation. Let our commitment to the African Agency be reflected in our budgets, policies, and diplomatic positions. Let us have the courage to challenge external demands when they do not serve our people's interests. To our international partners, we welcome collaboration that is grounded in mutual respect and shared interest. But understand that the era of externally imposed solutions is over. The most effective partnership we recognize and amplify African agency rather than substitute for it. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on May 25th, 1963, when representatives of 30 African nations convened in Addis Ababa to form the Organization of African Unity, Emperor Haile Selassie reminded them, and I quote, "The task on which we have embarked, the making of Africa, will not wait. We must act to shape and mold the future and leave our imprint on the events as they slip past into history." End of quote. 62 years later, as we gather on the eve of Africa Day, his words resonate with renewed urgency. Our sacred mission remains to unite our continent, restore its dignity, and secure its future. It will not be easy, but it is not beyond our reach. Africa is waiting. Africa is watching. The world is listening. History is waiting. Thank you.